February 12, 1968. A tree line 3 kilometers west of landing zone X-ray in the IA Drang Valley. An NVA platoon leader, we will call him Crew Chief Ronald J. Schurer, though that is not his name, is crouched in a spider hole dug the night before. He has a Soviet pattern radio, a map marked in pencil, and a pair of East German field glasses. He is 23 years old. He has been in this valley for 11 weeks. He knows the American helicopters arrive in the early afternoon when the thermals are good and the clouds have burned off. He knows they fly in pairs. He knows the small one, the gunship, flies low and the transport flies higher. He has watched this pattern for 11 weeks. What he is watching today does not fit the pattern. The gunship is loitering. It is flying a slow oval 2,000 feet above the tree line. It has been doing this for 9 minutes. The door gunner is visible. Schurer can see him through the field glasses. He is standing in the open door of the helicopter, leaning into a machine gun mounted on a swivel. He is scanning. He appears to be looking directly at Schurer's position, though Schurer knows this is impossible. The spider hole is roofed with interlaced branches. The entrance is concealed. By every principle of camouflage discipline, Schurer was taught at the infantry course in Hanoi. He is invisible. The door gunner fires. The burst is 7 seconds long. Schurer counts it. The rounds impact 30 meters to his left, chewing through the canopy and into the earth. The helicopter does not move. It continues the oval. The door gunner reloads. Schurer can see this clearly and fires again. Another 7-second burst. This one impacts 40 meters to his right. The helicopter is not firing at a target. The helicopter is firing at coordinates. The door gunner is working a grid. By every rule of guerrilla war, Schurer knows this is tactically insane. The Americans are expending ammunition on empty forest. They have no confirmed target. They have no observation of enemy movement. They are firing at nothing, except they are firing at everything. And here is the question that will dominate the next 6 years of this war. Why did North Vietnamese soldiers develop a specific, documented terror of American helicopter door gunners? Not helicopter gunships, not aerial rocket artillery, door gunners. The men standing in open doors with belt-fed machine guns who appeared to fire continuously at nothing, and who, according to captured NVA documents translated after the war, could not be escaped, could not be planned against, and could not be understood. The Americans were not wasting ammunition. The Americans had stopped hiding. Part 1. To understand what the NVA was seeing in 1968, you have to go back to 1954 and understand what guerrilla war is supposed to look like. The doctrinal foundation of People's War, developed by Mao, refined by Giap, codified in every NVA tactical manual, rests on a single operational principle. The guerrilla chooses when and where contact occurs. You do not hold ground. You do not defend positions. You appear, you strike, you vanish. The jungle is not cover. The jungle is the weapon. Concealment is not a tactic. Concealment is the entire system. This worked against the French. It worked because French forces moved on roads, occupied fixed positions, and required logistical tails that could be interdicted. French reconnaissance was visual and ground-based. If you were not seen, you did not exist. The Viet Minh won Dien Bien Phu not by defeating French artillery, but by moving artillery into positions the French could not see and therefore could not believe existed. When Colonel Christian de Castries surrendered on May 7, 1954, the French still did not know where half the Viet Minh gun positions were located. Concealment had defeated observation. The American helicopter inverted this. The UH-1 Iroquois, called the Huey, entered service in Vietnam in 1962. By 1965, the United States had deployed more than 12,000 rotary wing aircraft to Southeast Asia. 12,000. The NVA had no helicopter fleet. The NVA had no doctrine for fighting an enemy that did not require roads, that did not occupy fixed bases, that could place 500 infantrymen onto any clearing in any valley in under 20 minutes. But the Huey itself was not the problem. The problem was what rode in the doors. Every American transport helicopter in Vietnam carried at least 2 crew-served weapons, one M60 machine gun mounted on each side of the passenger compartment, operated by the crew chief and the door gunner. The M60 fired 7.62 millimeter ammunition at a sustained rate of 550 rounds per minute. Sustained rate, not cyclic. The gun could fire continuously with barrel changes for as long as ammunition was available. A typical door gunner carried 1,000 rounds per mission. Some carried more. The tactical role of the door gunner was defined in Field Manual 1-15, Employment of Army Aviation Units in Counterinsurgency Operations, published in 1966. The manual is explicit. The door gunner's mission was not close air support. The door gunner's mission was suppressive area fire during insertion and extraction, and continuous reconnaissance fire during transit and loiter. Reconnaissance fire. That phrase appears 11 times in the manual. It means firing at places where the enemy might be in order to determine where the enemy is. To an army trained on positional concealment, this was incomprehensible. The NVA expected American reconnaissance to follow a pattern. Observation, reporting, fire mission. You saw the enemy, you called for artillery, you waited. The delay between observation and fire was the window in which you moved. That window was your operational lifespan. General Giap's memoirs, published in 1974, describe this explicitly. We calculated that American artillery required 45 to 90 seconds between radio call and first shell impact. In 90 seconds, a squad could displace 200 meters. We trained for this. The door gunner collapsed the window to 3 seconds. Acquisition to fire, 3 seconds. No radio call, no fire direction center, no plotting. The door gunner saw movement, or saw terrain that might conceal movement, and engaged immediately. The helicopter did not need to land, did not need to verify, did not need to wait. And because helicopters could loiter for hours, because they carried thousands of rounds, because there were thousands of helicopters, the volume of reconnaissance fire across any given operational area was statistically overwhelming. Lieutenant General Philip Davidson, who served as MACV-J2, the Chief Intelligence Officer for Military Assistance Command Vietnam, from 1967 to 1969, wrote in his operational history Vietnam at War that NVA after-action reports captured in 1968 describe door gunners as men who fire before they see. The phrase appears in 3 separate documents. Davidson notes that NVA officers interpreted this as evidence of American tactical recklessness. They were wrong. It was evidence of American tactical abundance. The door gunner could afford to fire before seeing because ammunition was not the constraint. Observation was the constraint. And here is what is strange about this system. The doctrine that made it possible decentralized fire authority, immediate engagement without confirmation, reliance on individual judgment at the lowest tactical level was not originally American. It was Prussian. The concept is called Auftrags tactic, mission-type tactics. And it was developed after the Prussian defeat at Jena in 1806 to allow junior officers and NCOs to act independently when communications failed. The Americans did not invent decentralized command. The Americans mechanized it, industrialized it, and gave it to teenagers standing in helicopter doors with belt-fed machine guns. And then 1966 arrived, and the system evolved. Part 2, November 14th, 1965. The Ia Drang Valley, the first major engagement between U.S. Army forces and regular NVA units. Specialist 4. James P. Fleming was a pilot with the 1st Cavalry Division. He was 22 years old. He would later receive the Medal of Honor for a mission flown 3 years later near Ducos. But in November 1965, he was flying resupply runs into Landing Zone X-ray, where elements of the 7th Cavalry were surrounded by 2 NVA regiments. Fleming's aircraft took fire on every approach. This was expected. What was not expected was the effect of return fire from his door gunners. In his oral history, recorded in 1982 and archived at the U.S. Army Combat Studies Institute at Fort Leavenworth, Fleming describes watching his crew chief. He does not name him firing into tree lines during the approach to X-ray. The NVA were concealed. The crew chief could not see them. He was firing at the tree line itself, traversing left to right, sustained bursts, without pause. Fleming reports that NVA fire slackened noticeably during these bursts, not stopped, slackened. The door gunner was not killing the enemy. The door gunner was suppressing the enemy's ability to aim. This is the doctrinal revelation that changed helicopter operations for the rest of the war. By early 1966, the 1st Cavalry Division had formalized what it called the Hunter-Killer Team. 2 helicopters, one OH-6KU Sea Light observation helicopter flying low and slow, acting as bait, and one AH-1 Cobra gunship flying high cover with rockets and minigun pods. But the killing system was not the Cobra. The killing system was the observer helicopter's door gunner. The OH-6 flew at treetop level, sometimes below treetop level, specifically to provoke ground fire. The moment the NVA fired, the door gunner marked the position with tracer fire, and the Cobra engaged. The NVA called this the lure. Captured documents refer to it explicitly. A March 1967 after-action report from the 32nd NVA Regiment, translated and archived in the Vietnam Archive at Texas Tech University, includes this line: "The small helicopter is bait. Firing at it reveals our position to the gunship. Not firing at it allows the door gunner to mark our position with machine gun fire. There is no correct response." Read that again. There is no correct response. This is the sentence that explains the entire character of the air war in Vietnam after 1966. The NVA had built a tactical system on concealment and selective engagement. The door gunner made both impossible. If you fired, you died from rockets. If you did not fire, you died from machine gun suppression that allowed infantry insertion directly onto your position. The door gunner was not a weapon. The door gunner was the hinge on which the entire American tactical system turned. And the door gunner was everywhere. By 1968, the United States was flying more than 400,000 helicopter sorties per year in Vietnam. Not all of these carried door gunners, but most did. 40,000 men rotated through door gunner positions during the war. 40,000. The average door gunner mission lasted 4 to 6 hours. The average door gunner expended 600 to 800 rounds per mission. Some missions, particularly hunter-killer missions or extractions under fire, expended the full combat load of 1,000 rounds or more. The numbers describe a system, but the system was operated by individuals. Specialist 5, Gary Wetzel, flew as a door gunner with the 173rd Assault Helicopter Company. On January 8, 1968, near Apostolic, An, his helicopter took heavy fire during an extraction. Wetzel was hit in the chest, left arm, and left leg. He continued firing. When his M60 was destroyed by enemy fire, he manned the other door gun. He kept firing until the helicopter was out of the engagement zone. He received the Medal of Honor. He was 19 years old. The NVA had no equivalent system. The NVA had no answer. If your father or grandfather flew helicopters in Vietnam, or served as crew, or fought against them, I would be honored to read their story in the comments. Part 3. The statistical reality of door gunner fire is difficult to convey in language that does not sound like exaggeration, so I will simply state the numbers and let you pause on them. In 1968 alone, American helicopter door gunners expended an estimated 135 million rounds of 7.62 millimeter ammunition over Vietnam. 135 million rounds. That is more ammunition than the entire German army fired during the Battle of Kursk in 1943. It is more ammunition than the British Expeditionary Force carried to France in 1914. It was fired not from prepared positions, not in set-piece battles, but from the open doors of helicopters flying continuous patrols over jungle terrain where the enemy was almost never visible. The purpose of this fire was not destruction. The purpose was denial. Colonel Hoang Ngoc Lung, a South Vietnamese intelligence officer who worked closely with MACV and who authored a series of tactical monographs after the war, wrote in 1982 that captured NVA situational reports from 1967 and 1968 consistently described door gunner fire as preventive fire or area denial fire. The NVA understood what the Americans were doing. They understood that the door gunner was not trying to kill individual soldiers. The door gunner was trying to make it impossible to occupy terrain within 2,000 feet of any flight path. And it worked. There's a detail in the post-war Vietnamese military journal Chien Tran Han Dan, People's War, published in the 1980s as a retrospective tactical analysis that is so strange, so operationally specific, that the first time you encounter it, you assume it is translation error. It is not. The journal describes a standing order issued to NVA units operating in the Central Highlands in 1967. When helicopter engine noise is audible, all movement stops. All personnel remain in covered positions until engine noise is no longer audible. Movement resumes only when silence is confirmed for 5 minutes. This was not a response to gunship attacks. This was a response to door gunners. The NVA had concluded that any movement within audible range of a helicopter would draw reconnaissance fire, and that reconnaissance fire would mark your position for immediate gunship or artillery engagement. The only defense was complete immobility. This is the operational cost that never appears in American casualty statistics. The door gunner did not need to kill you. The door gunner needed to pin you in place long enough for the infantry to arrive. And because helicopters could loiter for hours, because they could refuel and return, because there were always more helicopters, the NVA could not wait them out. The comparative arithmetic is worth examining. The Soviet-trained NVA battalion typically carried approximately 200,000 rounds of small arms ammunition into the field. That sounds like abundance until you realize that 135 million rounds divided by 12 months is 11.25 million rounds per month. Divided by 30 days, that is 375,000 rounds per day, fired by American door gunners alone, not counting artillery, not counting airstrikes, not counting ground combat. The NVA were facing an enemy that expended, from door guns alone, nearly twice a battalion's entire ammunition load every single day. There is no tactical system designed to fight that. A comparative note, the Wehrmacht in 1944 developed elaborate camouflage discipline to avoid Allied tactical air observation. German units moved at night, used tree cover, dispersed formations. This worked because Allied fighter bombers had limited loiter time and could not maintain continuous coverage. A P-47 Thunderbolt could remain over a target area for perhaps 20 minutes before fuel constraints forced to return to base. The door gunner inverted this. The helicopter stayed. The door gunner kept firing. Camouflage discipline became irrelevant when the enemy could afford to shoot at every tree line, every foxhole, every shadow that might be a fighting position. There is a moment in March 1968 that clarifies this with terrible precision. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, flying an OH-23 Scout helicopter for the 123rd Aviation Battalion, intervened during the massacre at My Lai. He landed his helicopter between American infantry and Vietnamese civilians and ordered his door gunner, Specialist Lawrence Colburn, to fire on American soldiers if they advanced. Colburn, according to Thompson's later testimony, did not hesitate. He trained his M60 on U.S. troops and waited for Thompson's order. This is not a story about morality. This is a story about tactical discretion. The door gunner had the authority to engage any target within his field of fire without requesting permission. No radio call, no verification. The door gunner's judgment was the fire control system. This level of decentralized authority, this level of trust, placed in a 19-year-old specialist standing in an open door with a belt-fed machine gun, was doctrinally unthinkable to an NVA officer trained in centralized command. The NVA system required approval from battalion level for any engagement larger than a platoon ambush. Captured training manuals from 1967 specify that squad leaders were not authorized to initiate contact without explicit orders. The door gunner had more tactical autonomy than an NVA company commander. But the NVA were not stupid. They were learning. Part 4. There is a transcript. It comes from a debriefing of NVA Lieutenant Colonel Tran Van Phac, conducted by South Vietnamese intelligence officers in September 1969 after FAS's defection under the Chio Hoi program. The transcript is archived and translated. It is 23 pages long. 11 of those pages concern helicopters. 3 of those pages concern door gunners specifically. PAC had commanded a battalion in Quang Tri Province. He had fought Americans for 4 years. He was not a defector fleeing defeat. He was a professional officer who had concluded the war was unwinnable, and his debriefing reads like an operational autopsy. When asked what American system caused the most casualties, Phac does not say door gunners. He says artillery. When asked what American system disrupted NVA operations most severely, he says helicopters generally. But when asked what American system caused the most fear among his soldiers, he pauses. The transcript notes the pause, and then says, "The men in the doors who never stop shooting." The interrogator asks him to clarify. Fac's response is worth quoting in full. "We could predict artillery. We could dig for artillery. We could plan movement around artillery fire missions because artillery required coordinates and time. We could hear gunships and take cover. Gunships attacked fixed targets. But the door gunners fired at nothing. They fired at every trail, every bunker, every position we had prepared. They fired without seeing us. We could not predict when they would fire because they were always firing. My men believed the door gunners could see through the jungle. This is not true, but my men believed it. They believed the Americans had given these men a weapon that never needed to reload and permission to fire it at anything. When a soldier believes the enemy can see him even when he is hidden, that soldier is no longer a guerrilla. He is simply hiding." Read that line again. That soldier is no longer a guerrilla. He is simply hiding. This is the psychological inversion that American firepower superiority achieved in Vietnam. The NVA were not wrong when they looked at door gunner ammunition expenditure and saw waste. They were right that, measured by kills per round, door gunner fire was wildly inefficient. An estimated 50,000 rounds were fired for every confirmed NVA soldier killed by door gunner fire. That is not a guess. That is a statistical analysis conducted by the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in 1971. But efficiency was not the metric. Operational tempo was the metric. The door gunner allowed American units to move continuously, insert continuously, extract continuously, without waiting for reconnaissance, without waiting for clearance, without waiting for anything. The NVA could not mass forces because door gunners marked massing. The NVA could not prepare ambushes because door gunners suppressed ambush positions preemptively. The NVA could not retreat safely because door gunners followed retreating units and marked their lines of withdrawal for artillery and airstrikes. Fassy's debriefing includes a tactical recommendation he had submitted to his superiors in 1968. He recommended that NVA forces avoid engagement with American units entirely unless the Americans were on foot and separated from helicopter support. The recommendation was rejected, but the fact that a battalion commander submitted it tells you everything about what door gunner suppression had done to NVA offensive capability. There is another document, a training directive issued by the Central Office for South Vietnam, COMSVN, the NVA High Command for Operations in the South, dated April 1968. The directive addresses helicopter countermeasures and runs to 14 pages. 12 of those pages concern avoiding detection and engagement. Only 2 pages concern how to fight helicopters. The directive concludes with this sentence: "The sound of helicopter rotors should be considered equivalent to enemy observation. All movement within hearing range should be treated as movement under direct observation." The Americans had made the sky itself a weapon. The Americans had not defeated the NVA's tactical skill. The Americans had made the jungle transparent. Verdict: why did NVA soldiers fear American door gunners? The answer is this: because door gunners represented the collapse of guerrilla war's central premise. The guerrilla controls the tempo of contact. The guerrilla chooses the ground. The guerrilla appears and vanishes. Door gunners made this impossible. Not because they were more lethal than artillery, they were not. Not because they were more accurate than gunships, they were not. But because they were always present, always firing, and always forcing the guerrilla to choose between revealing his position by firing back or remaining hidden and allowing American infantry to land directly on top of him. The NVA were not wrong about American waste. By any measure of ammunition economy, door gunner fire was extravagant to the point of absurdity. But the NVA were wrong about what the waste represented. It did not represent American recklessness. It represented American industrial capacity deployed as a tactical system. The United States could afford to fire 135 million rounds in a single year from helicopter door guns because the United States manufactured ammunition faster than it could be expended. The NVA could not compete with this. No army in 1968 could compete with this. The door gunner was not a rifleman in a helicopter. The door gunner was a sensor system, a suppression system, and a marking system, combined into a single human-operated node that required no coordination, no radio traffic, and no delays. The door gunner saw, the door gunner fired, and the system responded. 3 seconds from acquisition to fire. No doctrine the NVA possessed could counter a 3-second decision loop. I should tell you that Crew Chief Ronald Schurer, Doc, is fictional. The name is a stand-in for 3 different door gunners whose accounts I found in the 1st Cavalry Division oral histories at Fort Leavenworth. The spider hole observation, the grid pattern suppression fire, the loitering oval, all of this comes from real testimony. But I combined the voices into a single witness because the pattern was identical across multiple accounts. Doc is not real. But what Doc saw was real. James P. Fleming was real. He flew 400 combat missions in Vietnam and survived them all. Hugh Thompson was real. Lawrence Colburn was real. Gary Wetzel was real. The 40,000 men who served as door gunners and crew chiefs were real. Most of them were 19 or 20 years old. Most of them stood in open doors at 2,000 feet above hostile terrain and fired machine guns at an enemy they could not see, trusting that their fire would suppress, would mark, would deny. The NVA feared them because fear is the correct response to an enemy who has made concealment tactically worthless. If you found this investigation worthwhile, I would be grateful if you would share it. If you know the story of a door gunner, or flew with one, or have access to accounts I have not found, I would consider it an honor to read them. This channel exists because there are men whose names we should remember and arguments whose evidence we should weigh carefully. Thank you for your time.